Well, Afghanistan's August election and allegations of vote rigging created divisions, even within the United Nations. For more on this, let's cross over to Anna Naidu in our Washington, D.C. broadcast centre. Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Darren. One of those closely connected with the process was Peter Galbraith. He was the UN's Deputy Special Representative for Afghanistan. He was fired for questioning the UN's handling of the vote rigging allegations. Speaking to Al Jazeera, he discussed the fraud during August's election and leveled strong criticism at the head of the UN mission in Afghanistan. I began by asking him about the upcoming runoff vote and whether it was possible to hold a free and fair election at such short notice.
I think it can. A lot of the preparatory work has already been done in terms of printing the ballots, transporting them, coming up with a security plan. But the critical issue is whether the factors that caused the disaster on the 20th of August can and have been corrected. That's going to require leadership by the United Nations, which is responsible for supporting these elections. And basically, three things need to be done. First, the head of the UN mission needs to stop pretending that the Independent Election Commission is an independent body. All its members were appointed by Karzai. It made partisan decisions at every stage in the process. Second, it's now time to close down those ghost polling centers. These are places where a large number of votes were recorded, but they never actually opened. It's a bogus argument to suggest that people were disenfranchised by my suggestion that they be closed because they never opened. And finally, in each and every case where there was fraud, the Election Commission staff either committed the fraud, cooperated with those committing the fraud, or failed to report it. All those staff need to be replaced, not just the 200 who are being replaced.
Well, the UN Special Representative to Afghanistan, Kai Eide, that you mentioned there, has told Al Jazeera that the Afghan election institutions worked on election day. And in support of that, he points to the fact that, look, certain things went wrong. Yes, there was fraud, but there's been a recount, and the recount points to the fact that none of the candidates got below 50%, and there's going to be a runoff election.
Well, that's a very strange interpretation of the Afghan institutions working from a man who initially denied and didn't even want to discuss the fraud that took place. So let's begin. The Independent Election Commission failed to take steps that might have reduced the risk of fraud by closing these ghost polling stations. After the election took place, on the day before it announced the final preliminary results, it changed its own rules, abandoned published guidelines, which would have required the automatic exclusion of fraudulent ballots, and claimed it had no legal authority to exclude fraudulent ballots. As a result, on that last day, Karzai went from 47% to 54%. We now had a 7-week electoral and political crisis in Afghanistan. It's threatened to tear the country apart. It has undermined severely international support for the military mission there. And finally, at the end of the process, we got back to 47%. I don't think that's a case of the system working. And incidentally, the Electoral Complaints Commission only excluded part of the fraud. They had to prove it. But there was a lot of fraud even in that 47% that Karzai had.
Now, Kai Eide, whom you describe as a friend of 15 years, has been denying or playing down the fraud. That's what you have said. Why do you believe he's playing down this election?
Well, for two reasons. First, as he told me, he was concerned that if the UN discussed the fraud, it would threaten to cause unrest in Afghanistan. That's a point of view, but my view was different, namely that the fraud took place and we couldn't run away from it. And furthermore, we had a mandate from the Security Council to support free, fair, and transparent elections. And the second point is that he's been very close to President Karzai. And as a result, I think he didn't want the UN to be doing things that might alienate President Karzai.
Kai Eide has also said, when he talked with us here at Al Jazeera, he's also told us that he had no hand in your dismissal as the Deputy UN Representative to Afghanistan. Is that right? He had no hand in your firing?
In making that statement, he was extremely economical with the truth. I was hired by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and he was the one who dismissed me. But Kai-ID lobbied intensely that I be removed, both within the UN system and with various governments. The Secretary General really was not aware of the facts on the ground in Afghanistan. After I sent a letter trying to head off my dismissal, the dismissal, in fact, was delayed for 24 hours. But the UN did this on Kai-ID's recommendation without looking at any of the factors in the dispute between Kai and myself over electoral fraud, and without investigating the circumstances in Kabul.